The crowd's jeering echoed through the dusty streets of Silver Creek as Catherine Blackwood stood before the town council, her trembling hands clasped protectively over her barely visible pregnancy. The year was 1878, and in this remote Colorado mining town, a woman carrying a child without a husband was more than just a scandal, it was cause for banishment. "Miss Blackwood," Mayor Holloway's voice boomed across the makeshift courtroom, silencing the murmurs of the townsfolk who had gathered to witness her judgment. "This council finds your condition reprehensible and your continued presence in Silver Creek a moral threat to decent families. You have until sundown tomorrow to collect your belongings and leave town permanently." Catherine's face remained composed, though her heart hammered wildly against her ribs. 22 years old and alone, she had come west after her parents' deaths, seeking a fresh start as the town's schoolteacher. For 8 months, she had built a respectable life, only to have it shattered by trust in the wrong man, a traveling salesman who had promised marriage before disappearing with the spring rains, leaving her with nothing but growing evidence of their union. "I have committed no crime," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite her fear. "I have taught your children with dedication and care." "You have deceived this town," countered Mrs. Pembroke, the banker's wife and self-appointed moral guardian of Silver Creek. "Parading as a virtuous woman while carrying your shame. Think of the children." As Catherine turned to leave, the crowd parted reluctantly. Some faces showed disgust, others pity, but none offered help. She had until tomorrow's sunset to figure out how to survive in the unforgiving western wilderness with no money, no connections, and a child growing inside her. Walking back to her small room behind the schoolhouse, Catherine allowed herself to weep only after closing the door. The meager possessions that represented her life in Silver Creek could fit in a single trunk: books, a few dresses, her mother's silver hairbrush. She had exactly $12.43 saved, hardly enough to start a new life elsewhere. That night, Catherine slept fitfully, waking to the sound of horses approaching shortly after dawn. Peering through the window, she saw a cloud of dust rising on the eastern trail, a single rider approaching at considerable speed. The stranger rode a chestnut Mustang that seemed as wild as the terrain itself. As he drew closer, Catherine could make out his features. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that seemed to catch the morning light. He rode with the easy confidence of a man who belonged in the saddle, his black Stetson pulled low against the rising sun. The rider dismounted outside the general store, tying his horse to the hitching post. He stretched his long frame, revealing a worn leather vest over a cotton shirt, practical denim pants, and boots that had clearly seen many miles. A gun belt sat low on his hips, not for show, but as a necessary tool of survival in these territories. Catherine withdrew from the window, resuming her packing. The arrival of a stranger meant nothing to her now. By sundown, she would be gone from the only place she had managed to call home since leaving Pennsylvania. In the general store, Ryder O'Malley was taking stock of his new surroundings. At 30 years old, he had spent the last decade driving cattle, tracking outlaws, and occasionally prospecting across the frontier. Silver Creek was just another stop on a journey without a clear destination. "Fine morning," he said to the storekeeper, his voice carrying the slight rasp of trail dust. "I could use some coffee and whatever news you might have about work in these parts." The storekeeper, a rotund man named Willis, was eager to share the town gossip along with the requested coffee. "Well, the Harper mine's always looking for strong backs, though I reckon a man like yourself isn't the type to go underground. Could be the rocking H-Need's hands they lost to a cattle rustling incident last month." Ryder nodded, sipping the surprisingly good coffee. "Any other news worth knowing about this place?" Willis leaned forward conspiratorially. "Oh, we've had quite the scandal. Schoolteacher turned out to be in a family way, no husband to speak of. Town council's sending her packing today. Shame, really, she was good with the young'uns." Something in Ryder's expression hardened. "The council's sending away a pregnant woman, on her own." Well, she's brought it on herself, hasn't she? Can't have that sort of influence around respectable folks, Willis said, though he had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Where might I find this council? Ryder asked, finishing his coffee in one swallow. Willis pointed toward the town hall. They'll be gathering at noon to make sure she leaves proper. Mayor Holloway runs things here, along with Banker Pembroke and the others. Ryder left a coin on the counter and stepped back into the morning light, his mind working through what he'd just learned. He had seen enough injustice in his travels to recognize it immediately. A woman alone in these territories faced dangers that self-righteous townspeople couldn't begin to imagine or perhaps didn't care to. Catherine was folding her last dress when a knock came at her door. She hesitated, wondering if the council had decided not to wait until sundown after all. Squaring her shoulders, she opened the door to find the stranger from earlier standing before her. "Miss Blackwood?" he asked, removing his hat. "Yes," she answered cautiously. "Ryder O'Malley, madam. I understand you're in some trouble with the town." Catherine regarded him warily. "Have you come to gawk, Mr. O'Malley? Or perhaps to ensure I leave promptly? I assure you I have no intention of overstaying my unwelcome." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Neither, Miss Blackwood. I've come to offer assistance." She studied him, trying to discern his motives. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin, and though he had the hard look of a man accustomed to the frontier's challenges, there was something in those eyes that spoke of kindness. "What sort of assistance could you possibly offer? I don't know you, Mr. O'Malley." "That's true enough," he acknowledged. "But I know what it means to be cast out, and I know these territories are no place for a woman alone, especially one in your condition." Catherine instinctively placed a hand over her stomach. "I appreciate your concern, but I propose marriage," he said simply, the words hung in the air between them. Catherine stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon, marriage," he repeated. "A practical arrangement. You need protection and a name for your child." "I can provide both." Catherine found herself speechless for perhaps the first time in her adult life. When she finally found her voice, it was tinged with suspicion. "Why would you do this? What could you possibly gain from marrying a disgraced schoolteacher you've never met before today?" Ryder shifted his weight, uncomfortable with explaining himself but recognizing the necessity. "I've been wandering for 10 years. It's a lonely life. I've saved enough to buy land, build something lasting. A man needs a purpose, and a family gives him that." "And you would raise another man's child as your own?" Catherine asked, still disbelieving. "A child is innocent of how they come into this world," he said firmly. "I was raised by a man who wasn't my blood father, but he was my father in every way that mattered." Catherine turned away, her mind racing. The proposition was absurd. Marriage to a complete stranger, a drifter, a cowboy versus facing the wilderness alone with her unborn child. Both options terrified her. "This is madness," she whispered. "Perhaps," Ryder agreed. "But sometimes madness is the most sensible choice available. The council would never accept it. They've made their judgment." "Let me worry about the council," he said with quiet confidence. "Will you consider my offer, Miss Blackwood?" Catherine looked at her packed trunk, then at the man standing before her, tall and steady as the mountains to the west. "I will consider it," she finally said, "but I need time." "Time is one thing we don't have much of," he reminded her gently. "The council meets at noon." As Ryder left to make his own preparations, Catherine sank onto her bed, overwhelmed. Marriage to a stranger seemed an impossible solution, yet his offer represented hope where there had been none. Could she trust this man she had just met? Did she have any real choice? By 11:30, the streets of Silver Creek were alive with activity. Word had spread about the cowboy who had ridden into town and immediately involved himself in local affairs. Speculation ran wild about his intentions toward the disgraced schoolteacher. Ryder spent the morning securing a marriage license from the reluctant town clerk and finding a judge willing to perform the ceremony on short notice. Judge Wilson, an elderly man with a pragmatic view of frontier justice, agreed after Ryder explained the situation. "Never been one to agree with Holloway's brand of righteousness," the judge confided. That young woman's only crime was trusting unwisely. Happens to the best of us. At precisely noon, the town council convened in the town hall. Mayor Holloway, a former Eastern businessman who had come west for his health, called the meeting to order with obvious satisfaction. The room was packed with townsfolk eager to witness Catherine Blackwood's final judgment. "Bring in the woman," Holloway instructed the town deputy. Catherine entered with her head held high, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She had changed into her best dress, a modest blue cotton with white lace at the collar. Her auburn hair was neatly pinned, and she carried herself with the dignity of a woman facing her executioners without flinching. She was, Ryder thought from his position at the back of the room, remarkably beautiful in her courage. "Miss Blackwood," the mayor began, "you stand before this council to receive—" "Excuse me," Ryder interrupted, stepping forward. A murmur ran through the crowd as he made his way to Catherine's side. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Mayor Holloway glared at the interruption. "Sir, this is an official proceeding. Who are you to interfere?" "Ryder O'Malley," he answered calmly. "And I'm here to inform the council that Miss Blackwood will not be leaving Silver Creek today or any other day." "This matter has already been decided," Banker Pembroke interjected, his jowls quivering with indignation. "The moral welfare of our community demands the lady is to be my wife," Ryder announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "We are to be married this afternoon." The silence that followed was profound, broken only when Catherine finally spoke. "It's true," she said softly, then with growing confidence. "Mr. O'Malley has asked for my hand, and I have accepted." The council members exchanged bewildered glances. Mrs. Pembroke recovered first, her thin lips pursed in suspicion. "This is clearly a ruse. This man rides into town the very day of your banishment. We weren't born yesterday, Miss Blackwood." "Actually," Ryder said, "Catherine and I have been corresponding for some time. I intended to arrive sooner, but travel delays prevented it. I only learned of your hasty judgment this morning." "Corresponding," Mayor Holloway echoed doubtfully. Catherine, understanding Ryder's strategy, played along. "Yes, we met when Mr. O'Malley passed through my hometown in Pennsylvania 2 years ago. We've exchanged letters ever since. His proposal came months ago, but the mail service being what it is." She let the implication hang in the air. "And the child?" Mrs. Pembroke demanded. Ryder's gaze hardened. "The child is mine, madam. I take full responsibility." The council members conferred in hushed tones. The story was convenient, perhaps too convenient, but difficult to disprove. More importantly, a married woman expecting a child was an entirely different matter from an unwed mother. "If you're to be married," Mayor Holloway said finally, "then do so. But until those vows are spoken, our decision stands." "We have the license," Ryder said, producing the document from his vest pocket, "and Judge Wilson has agreed to perform the ceremony at 2 o'clock today." The crowd began to disperse, some disappointed that the scandal had been diffused, others relieved that a more compassionate solution had been found. As Catherine and Ryder left the town hall, she kept her composure until they reached the privacy of the boardwalk outside. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Whether or not this marriage proceeds, I am grateful for what you did in there." Ryder looked down at her, his expression serious. "The offer stands, Miss Blackwood, but it must be your choice, freely made." Catherine took a deep breath. "I have no family, no prospects, and a child who will need a father. If you are truly willing to take on such a burden, then yes, Mr. O'Malley, I accept your proposal." 2 hours later, in Judge Wilson's cluttered office, Catherine Blackwood became Catherine O'Malley. The ceremony was brief, witnessed only by the judge's wife and the town doctor, who had always shown Catherine kindness. The words were familiar promises of devotion and fidelity, though the circumstances were anything but traditional. When Ryder slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, purchased hastily from the jeweler down the street, Catherine felt a strange sense of unreality. This man, still virtually a stranger, was now her husband, the father her child would know. The man whose name she would carry for the rest of her life. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado," Judge Wilson concluded. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. O'Malley." Ryder hesitated, clearly uncertain how to proceed with this part of the ceremony. Catherine solved the dilemma by rising on her tiptoes and placing a gentle kiss on his cheek. "Well then," the judge said, smiling at the awkward newlyweds, "that's done and proper. I wish you both happiness." As they stepped back into the afternoon sunlight, now legally bound to one another, Catherine realized she had no idea what would happen next. "Where do we go from here?" she asked quietly. "I've paid for a room at the hotel," Ryder replied, "for appearance's sake, but I'll sleep in the chair. Tomorrow, we'll need to decide where to settle." That night, in the modest hotel room, Catherine sat on the edge of the bed while Ryder arranged blankets on the armchair by the window. "You don't have to tell me," he said suddenly, "but I'd like to know something of the man who fathered your child." Catherine tensed. "Why?" "Because I want to understand what happened to you, not to judge, just to know." She was silent for so long that Ryder thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, as if recalling events that had happened to someone else. "His name was Edward Caldwell. He came through Silver Creek selling encyclopedias and medical elixirs. He was educated, charming, everything the men in this town are not. We began meeting in secret. He promised marriage, said he was establishing a territory where we would build our life together." She laughed bitterly. "I believed him. By the time I realized I was with child, he was long gone. I later heard he had a wife in St. Louis." "I'm sorry," Ryder said simply. "For what? My own foolishness? For his betrayal? No one deserves that." Catherine looked at him curiously. "You're not what I expected, Mr. O'Malley." "Ryder," he corrected gently. "I reckon we should use first names, being married and all." "Ryder," she repeated, testing the name. "And what about you? What's your story?" He settled into the chair, stretching his long legs before him. "Not much to tell. Born in Boston to a mother who died bringing me into this world. My father, well, the man who raised me, was a ship's carpenter, taught me his trade, but I had wanderlust even as a boy. When I turned 20, I headed west, been moving ever since." "Until now," Catherine observed. "Until now," he agreed. The following morning, they faced the practical aspects of their sudden marriage. Ryder had savings enough to purchase land and build a modest home, but they needed to decide where to settle. "The Bar T Ranch is selling a parcel about 15 miles from here," Ryder suggested over breakfast. "Good water, decent grazing land. I could raise horses, maybe some cattle." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "Close enough to town for supplies, but far enough to start fresh without constant scrutiny." "Exactly, though if you'd prefer to leave this area entirely." "No," she said decisively. "Running too far might look like shame. I'd rather stay and prove them wrong about both of us." By the end of the week, they had purchased 160 acres of promising land with a small existing cabin that could be expanded. As they rode out to their new property together, Catherine felt a mixture of trepidation and hope. The cabin was rudimentary, a single room with a stone fireplace, but it was solid and weathertight. "It needs work," Ryder acknowledged as they surveyed their new home. "But it's a start." "It's perfect," Catherine said, surprising herself with her sincerity. The first month of their marriage was defined by hard work and cautious navigation of their unusual arrangement. Ryder slept on a pallet by the fireplace, while Catherine took the small bed behind a curtain partition he had installed for her privacy. During the days, they worked side by side, Ryder expanding the cabin and building corrals, Catherine planting a garden and making the sparse interior more homelike. They were strangers becoming acquaintances, tentatively learning each other's habits and histories. Ryder discovered that Catherine hummed when she was concentrating, old hymns her mother had taught her. Catherine learned that Ryder had a surprising knowledge of literature, having educated himself during long nights on the trail with books stuffed in his saddlebags. As Catherine's pregnancy progressed, her condition became more visible. Ryder found himself increasingly protective, insisting she rest more frequently and taking on additional tasks to spare her exertion. When they ventured into town for supplies, he stayed close by her side, his silent presence deterring any lingering disapproval from the townsfolk. One evening, As summer transitioned to autumn, they sat on the newly built porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson. Catherine was mending a shirt while Ryder whittled a piece of pine wood. "May I ask you something personal?" Catherine ventured. "Of course. Have you ever been in love?" Ryder's hands stilled. "Once, a rancher's daughter in Wyoming. Her father didn't think a drifter was good enough for her." He was probably right. "What happened?" "She married the banker's son. Last I heard, they have 3 children." Catherine absorbed this information. "Do you regret it, not fighting harder for her?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "but life takes its turns. If things had gone differently there, I wouldn't be here now." The implication hung in the air between them. Catherine felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the evening's mild temperature. "And you?" Ryder asked. "With Caldwell, was it love?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "I thought it was. Now I think perhaps it was the idea of love, the romance of it all. I didn't really know him, I just wanted to believe in what he represented." As night fell, bringing with it a chorus of cricket songs and distant coyote calls, Catherine felt the baby move within her. Without thinking, she reached for Ryder's hand and placed it on her rounded abdomen. "Feel that," she whispered. His eyes widened as he felt the distinct push of a tiny foot or elbow. "That's remarkable." Their eyes met in the fading light, and something shifted between them, a connection deeper than their practical arrangement, a glimpse of what their future might truly hold. The following week brought their first significant challenge. Catherine awoke in the night with sharp pains that left her gasping. Ryder, instantly alert, lit the lamp and saw her pale face contorted in discomfort. "Something's wrong," she managed between clenched teeth. Without hesitation, he wrapped her in blankets, saddled his fastest horse and rode with her to town, covering the 15 miles in record time despite the darkness. The doctor, roused from sleep, examined Catherine with grave concern before announcing that she needed complete bed rest. "The baby is in danger," he explained. "You're showing signs of early labor. At 7 months, that's a serious concern." For 3 days, Catherine remained at the doctor's house under his wife's careful attention. Ryder rarely left her side, sleeping in a chair and taking his meals standing by the window. His concern was evident in the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. On the 4th morning, the doctor declared the crisis averted. "The baby seems stable now, but you must be extremely careful, Mrs. O'Malley. Bed rest for at least another 2 weeks, then limited activity until delivery." When they returned home, their dynamic necessarily shifted. Ryder took over all household duties in addition to his work on the ranch. He cooked simple but nourishing meals, did laundry, and kept the cabin clean while continuing to build their future. Each night, he read aloud to Catherine from one of her books, sometimes Shakespeare, sometimes Dickens, his deep voice bringing the words to life in their small home. Catherine, confined to bed or chair, found herself watching him with growing admiration. This man who had married her out of principle was now caring for her with genuine tenderness. His hands, rough from work, were impossibly gentle when he helped her move from bed to chair. His face, typically stoic, softened when he spoke to her about the future. One evening, as he read from Jane Eyre, Catherine interrupted him. "Why did you really do it, Ryder? The truth." He closed the book, marking the page with his finger. "Do what? Marry me." "It wasn't just about doing the right thing, was it?" Ryder was silent for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "When I heard about your situation, it reminded me of my mother. She died alone because no one would help her. I couldn't let that happen to you." He paused, but there was more. "When I saw you in that town hall, standing tall despite everything, I admired your courage. I thought any child would be fortunate to have such a mother." "And now," Catherine asked softly, "do you regret your decision?" "Not for a single moment," he answered without hesitation. The weeks passed, and as Catherine's health stabilized, she was able to move around the cabin more freely. The baby continued to grow, and with it, the connection between the unlikely couple deepened. They began to plan more concretely for the child's arrival. Ryder built a cradle from pine and oak, while Catherine sewed tiny garments from fabric purchased in town. In late November, as the first snow dusted the mountains, Catherine went into labor. This time, there was no rushing to town. The doctor had warned that travel could be dangerous given her history. Ryder sent a ranch hand for the doctor and midwife, then focused on making Catherine as comfortable as possible. "I'm scared," she admitted as the contractions intensified. Ryder took her hand firmly in his. "I'm right here, I won't leave you." The labor progressed through the night, long and difficult. By morning, the doctor still hadn't arrived, blocked, they would later learn, by an unexpected snowfall on the mountain pass. Catherine's strength was fading, and fear gripped Ryder's heart as he realized they would face this challenge alone. Drawing on distant memories of ranch births and frontier knowledge, he boiled water, gathered clean linens, and whispered constant encouragement to Catherine. When the moment finally came, he was there to catch the tiny, squalling infant who entered the world just as dawn broke over the eastern horizon. "A girl," he announced, his voice thick with emotion as he placed the newborn on Catherine's chest. "A perfect little girl." Catherine wept as she cradled her daughter, overwhelmed by the intensity of her feelings. "She's beautiful." Like her mother, Ryder said, and the look in his eyes told Catherine everything she needed to know about his feelings. "What shall we name her?" she asked. Ryder considered for a moment. "What about Hope, because that's what she represents for both of us." "Hope O'Malley," Catherine tested the name. "It's perfect." 3 days later, when the doctor finally arrived, he found a healthy mother and child and a father whose pride could barely be contained. The small family had survived their first major trial together, emerging stronger and more unified. As winter settled over their ranch, the cabin became a haven of warmth and newfound joy. Ryder moved his bedroll into the main room, still maintaining his respectful distance, but the emotional distance between them had all but vanished. Each night, after Hope was asleep in her cradle, they would talk for hours, sharing dreams, fears, and increasingly, their growing feelings for one another. On Christmas Eve, with Hope sleeping soundly and a fire crackling in the hearth, Ryder presented Catherine with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It isn't much," he said apologetically. Catherine unwrapped it carefully to reveal a delicate silver locket. Opening it, she found a tiny portrait of Hope on one side and on the other a lock of Ryder's dark hair. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Catherine," Ryder began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I know our marriage began as an arrangement, but these past months, my feelings have changed." She looked up at him, her heart racing. "Mine have too." "I love you," he said simply. "Not out of duty or obligation, but truly and completely. I love the woman you are, your strength, your kindness, your determination. I want our marriage to be real in every way." Catherine moved to sit beside him, taking his weathered hands in hers. "It already is real, Ryder, perhaps not in the usual way, but we've built something true together, and I love you too, not because you saved me, but because of who you are." Their first real kiss was tentative, then deepening with the emotions they had held back for months. When they finally parted, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. O'Malley." "Merry Christmas, husband," she replied, the word finally feeling completely right. 5 years later, the O'Malley Ranch had expanded to include 2 more children, twin boys named James and William, and had become one of the most prosperous horse breeding operations in the territory. The original cabin had grown into a comfortable family home, with a wide porch where Catherine often sat in the evenings, watching Ryder teach Hope to ride her pony. Silver Creek had grown as well, and with time, the scandal of Catherine's arrival had faded into distant memory. She had even returned to teaching, opening a small school on their property for neighboring ranch children. On the anniversary of their wedding, Ryder surprised Catherine by taking her to the ridge overlooking their land at sunset. As they dismounted, he pulled something from his saddlebag, a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "What's this for?" she asked, smiling. "I realized something today," he said, pouring the sparkling wine. "We never had a proper wedding celebration. And more importantly, I never properly asked you to marry me. It was all rather rushed, if you recall." Catherine laughed. "I believe the word is unconventional." Ryder set down the glasses and, to her surprise, dropped to one knee before her. From his pocket, he produced a ring with a small but brilliant diamond. Catherine O'Malley, these 5 years have been the happiest of my life. You've given me a family, a purpose, and a love I never thought possible. Would you do me the honor of continuing to be my wife? This time with no town council, no urgency, just because I love you more than life itself. Tears filled Catherine's eyes as she pulled him to his feet. Yes, she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long, golden shadows across their land, they sealed their renewal with a kiss that held all the passion, trust, and love that had grown between them. What had begun as an act of rescue had transformed into a love story neither could have imagined, proof that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. From the hill, they could see Hope playing with her brothers in the yard below, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. This was what they had built together, not just a ranch, but a family and a home filled with love. Not bad for a drifter and a disgraced schoolteacher, Ryder murmured against her hair. I'd say we did quite well for ourselves, Catherine agreed, leaning into his embrace as they watched their children, the living embodiment of their unexpected love story, chase fireflies in the gathering dusk.